Okay, well, we have a lot to do today, so let's go ahead and kick off. Again, I'd like to welcome you to another Aviatrix webinar. I am Woody Woodworth. I'll be your host today. I'm a Principal Solutions Strategist at Aviatrix, and we're here to talk to you today about some cool new features in the product. And we're going to focus on a cool new feature called SecurityGroups, which is found in CoPilot. And to use the SecurityGroups feature, in your controller code, you need to be running at a minimum 6.8, although we recommend 6.9 as the latest stable code. And I, in my demo, am running CoPilot 3.73, although earlier versions of CoPilot do support SmartGroups, but for all the features we're looking at today and how they work, you should be in the 3.7 code train. So we're going to look at security groups as they mesh and interoperate across a couple of different facets in CoPilot through topology, network visibility. We're going to look at how we can use them in CostIQ and FinOps, in distributed firewalling and security, and then also a newer feature that we'll examine called Intelligent Cloud Analytics, which is basically a dynamic app performance dashboard. Okay, so we'll save Q&A to the end. Please do hold your questions until the end of the presentation and feel free to put them up in chat. So I'll make sure we save at least 5+ minutes to handle any questions. And I do hope we have questions, and I'll be happy to answer as many as I can. All right, with that being said, let's just kick off with the demo. I'm just going to do a live demo today in CoPilot and show you how these features work. So let me share my screen. Okay, that should be coming through now. If not, please let me know and I can adjust, but that should be visible to everyone. So first, we're going to talk about smart groups, what they mean, what they do, how they work. And then we're going to go through a fun exercise of actually using them to complete kind of a high pressure workflow and see how efficient and helpful they can be. And if I do the demo correctly, hopefully by the end of the webinar, you are convinced. So smart groups, of course, are visible here on the left side of CoPilot. They have their own menu item. And I've made just a few initial smart groups for us just to take a look at it, explore, and then, of course, we'll create some other ones dynamically. So what is a smart group? A smart group is a resource folder, or really a playlist for policy. And I mentioned the term playlist because you gather assets in smart groups based on a number of different criteria. Those criteria are primarily tag-based, which means the controller of our platform, as long as you have onboarded a cloud account or a subscription, is going to constantly be dynamically pulling tags and metadata from all of your network assets and collecting them in a database. And then you can filter them using smart groups for a bunch of different purposes. So for example, let's just take a look at this engineering dev smart group that I've created. If we click on this pencil icon here, we can edit it and see what's happening inside. So obviously you give smart groups a name, and then you start to organize them by resource type. And the resource type that we currently support are, of course, networking focused things and Aviatrix focused things. So virtual machines, subnets, VPCs, VNets, edge sites, and IPs and CIDRs. And here you've seen that I have chosen the resource type virtual machine, and that I've chosen a tag, which is a custom tag that the asset is already created with. Someone that built the asset, in this case in Azure, used a custom tag, and that key portion of the tag is department, and the value here is eng-dev. And if I click over to Azure, you can actually see that that asset carries that tag, and here's the virtual machine that we're using in this example. So to create a smart group, there are some good tips and tricks to this. It uses AND matching for your criteria. So if I pull up a virtual machine as my resource type, and I want to say I want to look for this tag that has engineering prod, but I want to add other assets to it, maybe a cloud default name or account or any other custom tag, I can click add condition. But remember, what that is doing is within the context of this one asset, I am using the AND operation. So let's say that I wanted to do a search for virtual machines that had a Department of Engineering prod, but were also in a production line. So I wanted to kind of increase the visibility of my smart group. So I could go here, I could look at, say, department, or actually let's look at environment in this case. That's another custom tag. And I could look for production. Now, oops, that didn't really yield the result that I wanted. Over in the resource selection menu, we see that the resource I had up here, and we'll see it reappear in a moment, disappeared. So why is that? That's because what I really wanted out of this criteria was an OR operation, meaning I wanted to see all virtual machines that carried the key of department and the value of int prod, and then the key of environment and the value of production. But what I'm doing is ANDing within this one expression, meaning that this virtual machine or all virtual machines don't simultaneously carry these two tags. Thus, I've lost the resource that I'm interested in. So I can click this little delete icon over here. I see that the resource I was working with comes back. It's a virtual machine, and here's some asset data on it. And let me cancel out of that. And the way to go about this to create an OR capability is to choose a new resource type. So let's go again. Let's choose virtual machines. I'm going to now, because I have a second criteria, go down to environment. I'm going to choose production, and boom, then I get the result I wanted, which are more assets. So just a tip and a trick to creating smart groups. Remember, the AND constraint is strict within this box against particular assets. And if I want OR, what I need to do is create multiple resource types, and then that criteria will work. And just to show you how dynamic smart groups are, we can actually play with the tags in the CSP tier underneath, right, in the actual cloud service provider. And we can look at just how quickly and dynamically the controller will adjust the smart group, which is really neat, meaning that when you're building policy with smart groups, it really will track the applications or workloads or resources that you're interested in almost real time, such that if you assign policy to it, like a security policy or an application dashboard policy, all of the assets that you've tracked under that smart group will be followed by the controller and by Aviatrix as they move across space and time, as long as the tags are doing what you expect them to do. So, for example, let's go here. Let's discard these changes. Let's say that I have a situation where this virtual machine is going to be promoted to, like this dev virtual machine, for example, is going to be promoted to production. Okay, so if that happens in the CSP tier, I should expect to see this virtual machine disappear and then hopefully reappear here under production. So this takes a little while to do. So while I do this operation, I'll also bring in some a workflow that we're going to go through to explore security groups further. So we're going to multitask a little bit. So let's go here to Azure. Here are the tags. I'm going to click edit. I'm going to go to department, and I'm going to change that to production. Okay, I'm going to save that change out. All right, that tag has been done. I'm going to go back to CoPilot. I'm going to X out of here. Now, the controller has like an egg timer on it that's adjustable in the properties of, in the settings portion of CoPilot on how quickly the interval that it's using to pull. But if you want to perceive a change right away, we just have this refresh CSP resources button. So I'm going to click that. Okay, this can take up to 60 seconds. So while that kind of moves away, it does its job or turns away. Let's talk a little bit about the workflow that we're going to do today and show you how smart groups will really help make that workflow super fast. So here's a hypothetical email that I received from my boss, Mr. Big. I've just shown up to work. I have my coffee, and in fact, I'll take a little sip right now. I'm sitting at my desk reading my email, and this is the first email that comes in at the top of my inbox. And Mr. Big says, Woody, there's 2 new SAP VMs somewhere in Azure that are unprotected. I need them to be identified, secured, and accounted for ASAP. I think they are part of component groups HANA and APAB. They are not allowed to talk to any public endpoints, and there's a compliance violation with this. There should be no insecure traffic going on. Oh, and by the way, make sure the network that's been built here is going to support the rest of the SAP migration, which is happening tomorrow. Oh, and also, can you please find out how much bandwidth the SAP team is using going to on-prem, because we need to build them. And Mr. Big wants all this stuff now. Great. So that sounds like a tall order. Might take me all day or longer, but let's see how quickly we can move through that. All right, so I've changed the tag. So before we kick off on that workflow, let's just go here and see if the result was as expected. Yep, and as you can see, that virtual machine has now been depopulated from my ingdev smart group and has now been added correctly to my production group. So that dynamic capability, again, is really cool. So when you write security policy, for example, as long as you're having good tag control down in the CSP level, your policy will follow these applications and workloads wherever they go, which is tremendously powerful. Okay, so how are we going to go about solving Mr. Big's ask here? All right, the first thing I want to do is go to this email and see if I can get some contextual clues about how to find these assets, needles and haystacks, which smart groups are really good at. So he says, I think they're part of component groups HANA and APAB. So great, let's do it. Let's create a new smart group together. So I'm going to click smart group. I'm going to call this one SAP HANA. All right, I'm going to make sure that I have a virtual machine resource type. And we are going to be scrolling through these tags. Maybe there's something in here that talks about component. Yep, application component. That's probably what Mr. Big was talking about. And yep, there's ABAP or ABAP, and there's HANA. So let's add HANA in. Yep, I've got a resource. Looks like it's in Azure. Looks like it's at East US. That's great. Let's save that out. Okay, then I get this completion pane over here. Notice that if I go to this filter column over here, or this is the filter, but this information column, I can also add in other information that can be helpful to me to explore this asset. So I can see what subscription it's in, the IP addresses, the different tags that it carries. So this is very helpful for just orientating yourself really quickly to new assets that come into your environment and understanding what they're doing. So that's great, but we have one more to do, which is APAB. So let's do this smart group. We'll go SAP ABAB. Okay, so it was that component tag that's helpful to us. Let's add ABAP in. Let's click save. Great. So there's another virtual machine. I can tell it's in Azure. It's in the same region. And per our email, I was just told that there are 2 new SAP VMs that are Azure. So I'm reasonably confident that these are the ones that Mr. Big was talking about. All right, so now what Mr. Big wants is for us to make sure that they're secure, right? And that they're not talking to public endpoints, that they're in compliance. So I can use smart groups in conjunction with a bunch of tools inside CoPilot to do that, that workflow and accomplish that goal very quickly and easily. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over here to topology, which I have pulled open in a separate tab for us. And we can also now search by smart tag in topology. So I'm going to go to condition. I'm going to select my filter key. And if I scroll all the way down, I'll see smart group. So I'll select that and see if I can get that done for us. Okay, it's being fussy. Let me just refresh. Okay, let's add in our condition again. Let's go to smart group. Okay, let's close out. We'll go here. It's funny, I just tested this. Okay, go to topology. All right, that's funny. It's not working. Well, we'll come back to that. Let's go to FlowIQ and see what kind of traffic is going on with these virtual machines, okay? So here is the name of the virtual machine. I remember that it had a tag that was about application component. So I'm going to go to FlowIQ. And now FlowIQ doesn't support smart groups, but it does support the same tags that the controller is pulling that creates smart groups. So I can actually look for a tag here as a source tag. I can do the application component key, and the values I can use are ABAP and HANA. Cool. So now I can see the sources of these virtual machines, who they're talking to, and the ports and protocols that they're using. And I'm really interested in these destination IPs that are going on. And right here, luckily, I don't see any public traffic, which is a good thing. Oh, there it is. I refreshed. So, oops, I do have public traffic. Oh, I see. Wait, no, I need to put that filter back down. Sorry, guys. So in the event that it did have public traffic, I'll show you what we could do to make sure that that's working for us in a secure way. So let's just do this again. Application component. In this case, I'll just go for ABAP. Okay. So good. It should be secure. In the event that it was talking to public IPs and there was a problem with this, what I could do would be to go up to security. I could go to Threat IQ up here, and I could go down to all the various threats that are happening. I could go to filter, and I could set a filter where the destination IP either contains, equals, or starts with some kind of value, and find out if any public IPs that that asset has been talking to represent known bad endpoints via the proof point database that Threat IQ is constantly using. And that can be very helpful. Likewise, under topology, let's give this one more shot, ladies and gentlemen, because we can actually use topology to sort here. So let me just go back. Let's go to all conditions. Maybe that was the thing that I didn't do. Maybe I can type it in. Here we go. Let's see if that works. Yep. Okay. So I just needed to type it in. Cool. Super. So let's go here and let's search out these smart groups that I wanted to look at in topology. Okay. Just refresh. Sometimes this happens. There we go. Cool. So here is a very cool topology view of these new assets that I'm trying to figure out and make sure are compliant and secure. And I get a very good, clear bird's eye view of what's happening with them. I see that they are all within an Azure region. I see that really they are connected by the same spoke. So I can expand and contract the spoke and then get the metadata that the spoke provides. So for example, the different subnets that are in the spoke on these outer concentric rings and the different virtual machines and other assets. So we have some spoke gateways here. It's a highly available topology. So there's 2 subnets for the Aviatrix spoke gateways, and there's the primary and secondary. And then here's one subnet that houses my HANA virtual machine. And here's one that handles ABAP or ABAP virtual machine. So great, let's harvest some metadata off this. Just want to make sure that I know everything I can about this. I've got the private IP. I'm actually going to copy and paste that out, because that might be helpful to me later. You never know. Okay, so let's go down here. We're going to click on this asset. We're going to grab that private IP. You know what? While I'm here, again, these are brand new assets. They just showed up. They don't have any policy on them yet. Mr. Big really needs this stuff to be locked down ASAP. So let's run a security scanner tool right here, which is conveniently located on the asset page or asset blade. So I'm going to click this. And that was my earlier report, but a good way to do a port sweep is, of course, just set, say, port 1 through 65,535. It supports single ports or ranges. We're going to click run. Now, what this does is 2 things. It's looking for known bad ports and protocols that are associated with malicious activity. And on any port that offers a TLS handshake, it's going to go through that TLS handshake and make sure that the ciphers are up to snuff and that the SSL libraries or TLS libraries are set to maximum security. So thankfully, the folks that have deployed this and put the code in have done their job correctly. Although I do see here that we have an open port on TCP 80. I'm going to make a note of that. I probably want to lock that down. So I'm going to paste that in a little clipboard I have for myself. All right, let's check the other asset over here. We're going to go up to ADAP and let's run that security scanner as well. Again, I've already done that, but a good way for a total port sweep is just to run the gamut. 65,535. Okay, let's run that. And as you can see, the scan report doesn't take too long. So there we go again. Anything that would be a nefarious known port or protocol will be flagged and given a rating. In this case, everything here is known and trusted and doesn't have any bad ciphers, and all my ciphers are there's no like TLS 1.0. Everything looks good from a TLS handshake perspective. But again, I've got some clear text traffic, and that's probably something that I want to sort out. So I'm going to paste that in a little clipboard to remind myself. All right, so we've figured out that these assets through FlowIQ are not comprehensively talking to any public IPs. If they were, we could have found them in ThreatIQ and made sure that they weren't exposed to any threats. So really what I need to do now is just write some security policy to button these machines up to make sure that they are secure and in compliance. So let's see how a SmartGroup would work with the distributed firewalling piece. So I'm going to go to security and I'm going to go to distributed firewalling. And what I'm going to do is write a rule that includes these new smart groups that I have just created. So let's say SAP as a name, outbound internet deny. So my source smart groups are going to be my two SAP ones that I just created, and my destination smart group will be a default one that Aviatrix provides called Anywhere, which is essentially all public endpoints, right? Quad 0. All right. I'm going to make sure that all protocols and ports are represented here. I'm going to move to deny. Now, I definitely want some logging on this. And then I have to choose, of course, like any firewall administrator would, if I want enforcement on or off. In this case, Mr. Big has been very explicit. He wants to make sure that we're in compliance. So I feel that I have everything I need to go ahead and run enforcement on this and just block any traffic that could be hitting malicious endpoint on the internet or any other public endpoint for that matter. So I'm going to save this out. So it's put in a queue, of course, where it's going to let us add additional rules or inspect this new rule against existing rules before we commit. But there's one other thing I want to do, which is fix that port 80 problem, right? So let's go here to rule. Let's go SAP, no HTTP outbound. Again, my source groups are going to be these two new smart groups, boom, boom. And my destination group will be one that I created earlier called RFC 1918. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. But as you suspect, it's all the private address spaces from RFC 1918, which is a nice way to use that CIDR capability of smart groups. And remember, right now, for the way the controller looks at objects across multiple clouds, tagged assets are supported in AWS, Azure, and GCP. Oracle, you can still use. Support for tagged assets in OCI is absolutely coming, but you can still use Oracle stuff or any on-prem stuff or any stuff that's coming from a branch or an edge device by using CIDRs. So CIDRs are still valuable to us, although smart groups are a much better way to go about it with the tag data. So I'm going to make sure that my protocol is set to TCP, my port is 80, and I'm going to go deny here, and I'll turn on logging again. And of course, I'm confident in this case that I'm going to run with enforcement because Mr. Big has been explicit. We shouldn't have any kind of insecure traffic happening here. So I'm going to save that out. Now I've got the two rules I need to bring these workloads into compliance, and I'm going to commit them down into the firewall. So we have another cool webinar coming, and I'll give you some more information on that at the end of this demo that's going to explore distributed firewalling in a lot more detail. And we're going to go through all of the other security features, embedded security features that we have to offer. So this is just a little teaser now for how smart groups and distributed firewalling work together, but be sure at the end to capture the data on when that new webinar is going to be, and we'll offer you a really nice deep dive into this new distributed firewalling feature. Okay, So great. Let's go back to the email here. These are some notes that I pasted. I got my open ports sorted. That's great. Here are the 2 IP addresses that I harvested. So I feel like I've done a pretty good job with some of this stuff Mr. Big wanted, and this has all happened pretty quickly. But now what I need to do is make sure that the network is going to support the rest of the SAP migration. And I've worked with Mr. Big plenty, and I know what he means is that the network is healthy, the path is healthy, there's no drop packets, and that the latency of this arrangement between these application tiers is going to be in a nominal range to make sure that SAP works correctly day in, day out. So luckily, we make that pretty easy with SmartGroups as well. So let's go down here to, going to go to troubleshoot. We're going to go to App IQ, and we have a newer feature here called Intelligent Cloud Analytics, which is a network dashboard arrangement that you can build using SmartGroups to customize relationships between different application tiers and make sure that the network latency and path between them is healthy. We'll get to that in just a minute, but let's also use flight path. And as that churns away, we'll go back to Intelligent Cloud Analytics, or ICA, and build in that app dashboard we need for SAP. So remember, I had saved those IP addresses out. So I'm going to put them as the source and destination here in these fields. And I'm definitely seeing that that does align with the correct asset in the cloud. I see the SAP flag. I see the Spoke 3 VNet that I'm familiar with from the topology. So I'm pretty confident this is the right stuff. This says it's not the right format. Maybe I have white space in here. I do. All right, cool. Oh, that's funny. It says they're external sources. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's do this. Maybe I copied them incorrectly. There, let's just convert them to the actual virtual machine that we're talking about. See if that happens. There we go. Okay, as that grinds away, we're going to go back to ICA and I'll show you how to build a view. All right, so we're going to call this view SAP. Again, SmartGroups make stuff super easy. So I'm going to choose ABAP and HANA. Oh, whoops, we're going to go back, and then I'm just going to save that out. Notice you could also put in other related applications and services that are peripheral to this view, as well as external connections or any Aviatrix Edge devices that you have on deck. So it's pretty comprehensive in terms of the full picture you want to paint about that network dashboard and all the different assets that need to collaborate together. So in this case, we're just doing a very simple example between 2 SmartGroups, but again, we provide a lot of other information for you to really fill out the view and make it useful. So I'm going to click Save. Okay, now what's happened is that in that instant, I'm getting a bunch of useful metadata on the health of the network that connects these 2 services or application tiers together. And the first thing, of course, again, is a visual reminder of how this is arranged. And again, through topology, I can quickly and easily figure out that these assets are in the same subnet. And if I want to explore that further, I can just click here, View in Topology, and then I'm going to get the big picture of that, make sure that I understand the network correctly. And I can use these little indicator arrows in the bottom right-hand corner to easily collapse and expand that diagram if I want a smaller big picture of what's happening. So again, that's nice. So we'll go back to App IQ, and I can tell right off the bat that my round trip times in milliseconds are absolutely nominal. SAP, by and large, tends to do well in 5 milliseconds or less. There's some exceptions to that, but definitely I know from my experience as a network engineer that I'm looking for 5 milliseconds as a horizon where I might be in doubt about the performance of the application in this particular case. As I drill into this, it's worth noting that what we're doing here is actually constantly probing and providing latency data from the Spoke gateways itself through the Aviatrix transit to potentially another spoke or back to that same spoke. So it's about the application behind that spoke all up, and the SmartGroup just paves the way for intelligent cloud analytics to understand which VPCs or VNets are involved to give you that gateway to gateway picture. So again, it's not actually harvesting millisecond latency VM to VM. If I wanted that, I could use other troubleshooting tools that we provide, such as FlowIQ, et cetera, or flight path. So let's take a look at that. So I've run this flight path test. Oh, that's hysterical. It I moused away and then it gave up on me. All right, let's try it one more time because flight path is really cool. It looks like when I put these IP addresses in here, I just need to resolve them to the correct instance underneath. Okay, so let's run this. This actually doesn't take too long, so let's just hang out. It's worth the wait, I promise. If you haven't used flight path before, it's pretty cool. Well, okay, let's let that run. Should have been faster. Let's leave this running in this currently open tab so I don't disturb it like I did last time. And we'll go to this tab here. And the last ask from Mr. Big was, can you find out how much bandwidth the SAP team is using to go to on-prem? Because he needs to build them as ASAP, which really means now. Luckily, we also make this very simple. So under billing and cost, we can go to CostIQ, another new feature in CoPilot. And CostIQ uses a similar structure to SmartGroups, which is called a cost center. So it at this time isn't tag based, but the spirit of SmartGroups is very similar, meaning it is something that is going to use named or tagged assets using cloud default VPC names down in the CP level for you to create arbitrary and important cost centers for you aligned against applications that are running within discrete VNets or VPCs. So as you can see here, I've already created one for SAP. It shows all the spokes where these SAP instances are deployed. And we see that the Spoke 3 VNet, again, is the new Azure deployment that everyone is so focused on. And it's going to break down all of the traffic per VPC that all of these different SAP spokes are using. So in this case, my top talker for SAP traffic within all SAP traffic is by and large this new deployment. So that's just something interesting to note. The rest of them look like they're really not online or that they are just minimally spun up here. So really, again, this is the one that's my top talker, and that helps me when I'm going to be doing my cost assessment. Now, remember, cost centers can overlap. So that means these VPCs, which I have selected for SAP, can also be part of bigger or more, overlapping hierarchical structures. So, for example, they could also be included in engineering or e-com or something like that. So when you see these percentages, it's not absolute, it's relative. So this is 48% of all traffic across the Aviatrix airspace or the Aviatrix transit environment. And again, this doesn't mean that this 51% is in opposition. It's relative because these things can overlap like a Venn diagram. But at least I know that SAP is a top talker and top consumer. So let's go down to shared services here, and let's figure out how much traffic is going to on-prem. Now, prior to CostIQ, this could be a huge challenge for some folks, but again, we're trying really hard to make this very easy and intuitive. So when you want to add in a shared service, it's really simple. You just put in a name and a list or arrangement of IPs and CIDRs. So you can really put in any shared service you want and call it what you want. Usually these are things like databases and storage, things like S3 buckets or blobs. In this case, I put some CIDRs that represent on-prem. So this would be something going over a VPN connection or a direct connect or express route. So I click on on-prem and I see here just very quickly that SAP, as the cost center that I have created, is consuming 50% of that bandwidth. Great. So now I can get back to Mr. Big and say, yep, you need to send SAP 50% of that bill. And that's a very easy slam dunk. If we didn't want to see it by cost center, but also account, that is absolutely possible, because sometimes cloud accounts or subscriptions are much cleaner boundaries for billing and FinOps than things that are being assembled dynamically like cost centers. So in this case, I can go to this one account here, and if I mouse over it, I see that it's the Azure account, Azure demo account, that's consuming 100% of the traffic. So that would be another way for me to bill back, so I could give Mr. Big some options if that was more effective to him. So last thing before we depart there, I know it took a while, but thank you for being patient. The flight path tells me everything I need to know about the health of this network respective to the virtual machines that were involved. So if I go down here, I get all of the network and even on the virtual machines themselves, their memory and disk stuff, you know, all the metrics on how they're performing from a host and OS level, in addition to all of their network information. And if there are problems, they will actually be illuminated either up top or down within the networking and security constructs of the CSP themselves. So if there's a problem with a security group, or if there's a problem with a route that lives down at the CSP level, they would be flagged here. And I can actually see all of the things that are happening at the CSP level. And if I even wanted to, I could drill into this object. It would open it for me in Azure for further inspection. So great, we've knocked out everything that was supposed to happen on Mr. Big's list. We did this in just about half an hour. I could knock that email off the top of my calendar. I can make Mr. Big happy, and then I can go grab some lunch with my friends. So with that, the demo is at a close, and I will now go back to presentation mode and see about handling some questions for Q&A. We have a survey for you that we're going to give at the end of the webinar. You can also take that survey anytime you want before the close of the webinar by clicking the little pink tablet icon on your toolboard. And we would love your feedback. So if you have time, please do that for us. So here's some questions. We have a question. Can you create a rule for any endpoint not in a smart group? What about auto creation of the smart groups? Great question. So auto creation of the smart groups we'll tackle first. I will go back and share my screen really quickly. If it lets me, it will. Okay, just give me one moment. So auto creation of smart groups is something that we are going to see more and more of as the product continues to gain capability. We definitely have one cool area where that works now, which is for SAP services. So you can click up here on SAP services. We will harvest all of the port and protocol information that we identify based on known ports and known services that are belonging to SAP. We're going to show you what service it is, and you can actually select different assets out of this and go and create a smart group like this. So I could call it SAP. So this is our first foray into this, but more will come because we understand that that automated application-based awareness is a really nice marriage with smart groups. In order to create something that's for any endpoint that's not in a smart group, that is where the sliders are happy to us, so or will avail us. So again, a smart group knows about cloud native things intuitively through the controller and all that tagged information. But again, for a policy perspective, this IP insider is really just anything you need it to be. It could be a host on the internet. It could be something over a VPN tunnel. It could be a branch. So in this way, we've let this be very flexible for you. Okay, next question. Do the tags utilized for smart groups in FlowIQ have to come from a cloud native tag? Yes, they do. So those tags should be set by your business units or your application teams or DevOps folks that are deploying this. So for smart groups to be really useful, you do need to have pretty good policy control. In fact, very good policy control about tag use down to the CSP level. The good news is that a lot of the enterprises and customers I talk to are either approaching this and have already embarked on this journey about using tags as a way for policy implementation or FinOps implementation, so they have good, clean guidelines and rules about it, or they're actually already using it day to day. So tags really are important to us because, remember, assets and cloud are less and less informed by IP addresses. IP address is still important, but it's not nearly as important as it is on-prem, because as we move into PaaS and SaaS and containers and these things, IP addresses will come and go. They're ephemeral. It's much better to use metadata to organize your policy in cloud. And that way, that metadata is absolute, and it makes it much quicker to absorb and build policy around, as opposed to IP addresses, which again puts IT professionals in a cat and mouse game to figure out, okay, what IP addresses is the service using, if it even yields them, if it's a SaaS service that even talks to me about them. Okay, next question. This product CoPilot name will change in the future? No, CoPilot is going to be our name moving forward. And actually more and more of our user experience, or GUI, is going to be being onboarded into CoPilot. So it's a very healthy, growing ecosystem. Is this fully compliant? Certainly, it is fully compliant from a security perspective, insofar as within CoPilot, other than the tagged metadata and the names of the objects, we are not gathering or storing any personal information or any traffic that moves through the Aviatrix backbone. So the only data at rest that we are keeping, again, is this database of tagged assets, and it is encrypted. But any customer traffic, any customer data, we don't store, we don't use, we don't harvest. So I hope that helps answer that question. This is only for monitoring purposes, or can we do modifications as well? I don't fully understand that question. I will say that I would hope to see SmartGroups move more into the monitoring arena and alerting arena of CoPilot, and I'm sure we have plans to do that, insofar as you can build different alerts and alarms based on SmartGroups. But I hope through the demo you've realized that it really is about policy, and policy for your application awareness, policy for your security awareness, policy for cost and FinOps, and so on and so forth. These are all great questions. Are there any other questions I can help answer? All right. So here's that webinar I was talking about. This is the deeper dive into all of our security products, including secure egress and distributed firewalling and ThreatIQ and all the cool stuff we offer as an embedded capability within the network itself. So it's Tuesday, April 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. If you want to screenshot this or take a quick picture of that QR code, you can actually get registered for it right away. I think distributed firewalling and secure egress with SmartGroups is super exciting, so we're going to be really happy to talk to you about that in depth. And you can always go to aviatrix.com/events to learn more and always know what's coming up in the webinar world and Tech Talk world. And if you want to learn more about any of our other solutions or training or just overall benefits, please feel free to check out these links and QR codes. And just explore our website in general. It's full of really good stuff. So that's it. I want to thank everyone for coming. I hope it was fun and informative. And we will hopefully see you at an upcoming event. Thank you so much.